Nobody likes being advertised to. Ads are kind of just something we've all grown to live with. It's usually just people being aggressively white while talking about medicine, but whatever, it's only like 30 seconds long. My headache medication is really helping me out. All it gives me is rickets, lesions, a heroin addiction, headaches, and it made me kill my dog. Video games are no different. Video game ads have been around since the dawn of time. Yeah, 1972. They were still liable to try to hang somebody for witchcraft because they owned a Magnavox Odyssey. Some explanation was required. Over the years, video game ads have taken several forms. Print ads, commercials, demonstrations, trade events, even full-blown marketing campaigns. There have been some downright iconic video game commercials from over the years, from the Smash 64 commercial, the Halo 3 Believe commercial, Genesis Does What Nintendo Don't, which left Nintendo desperately scrambling to try to find any pun with the name Sega. Sega, more like say gay. Wait, Giga, no! These are all ads that will stick in your mind long after they're over, after you've already gotten the game, and even after the console itself is outmoded by newer and better hardware. Even those that aren't super influential still manage to stick in a lot of people's minds. There's the Crash Bandicoot ads taking direct pot shots at Nintendo in their own backyard, the Nintendo Play It Loud commercials, which were like the Sega commercials, but a lot more embarrassing with time, and the GameCube ad with Luigi giving Mario a double-leg takedown. Commercials and ads can do a great job getting across the attitude and mood a game is going for, and can solidify a game's reputation. But who cares about doing anything right? You don't watch car parking compilations, you want car crashes, and video game ads have plenty of them. Forspoken looks like it could be an amazingly fun and fluid game in a magical world that could be the can't miss experience of 2023. If it comes with a built-in mute button, maybe. Today we're going over some of the worst advertising the companies have cooked up to try to hornswoggle you into loosening your wallet. It's important to start where ads themselves started. Before you had that box in your house that let you know what The Simpsons were up to whenever you wanted, sheets of paper used to be stapled together and shipped to your house. Print media for games created some of the most endearing and memorable pieces of advertising in all of gaming. The Paper Mario free demo ad, Mortal Kombat's So Real It Hurts, the Alien Resurrection ultrasound. They could get really creative and create super striking and memorable imagery. But sometimes they get it wrong. There's an incredibly high density of ads where the idea seems to be, all right, we'll show you some lady bits, now you have to buy the game, like it's some sort of mutual exchange thing. Guys, check it out, casual sex is a thing of the past, it's time to go ranked. This infamous Sega Saturn ad kind of encapsulates what I was talking about when it comes to sex selling in video game ads. Just a full 2-page spread of a lady with Sega Saturn games obscuring anything too risque. In case you didn't notice, there's a beautiful naked woman on this page. Yeah, I know, and all these crappy Saturn games are getting in the way! This ad was printed a mere 2 years away from the Sega Saturn's discontinuation, so you can see Sega was throwing anything at the wall to see what stuck. Okay, so we get you some pornography, and you have to buy a Saturn, alright? You owe us! She's got blonde hair, blue eyes, and the best body money can buy. So what? There's no time for distractions when you're deep in Sega Saturn! Trust me, I don't think anybody with a Sega Saturn is in any danger of being distracted by a naked woman in their bed. It eventually goes on to talk about games like Sega Rally and Panzer Dragoon, but either the person reading this was preoccupied trying to look past the Virtua Fighter screenshot or ripping the page out of the magazine to protect their child. Sega was absolutely unstoppable when it came to bad ads in the 90s, partnering with Viz magazine in the UK to publish lewd, suggestive, and downright piss-filled ads. If Nintendo was going to take the high road, Sega would go down low. Way low. Ads with men's balls, pissing in the snow, more balls, dolphins on cocaine, more balls. They really had one idea and just stretched it. If you've seen any ad out of this lineup, it's probably this one, and it's a complete travesty. Are you looking at this? The Genesis controller doesn't have a joystick? That's false advertising! It's important to note, because I don't feel like a lot of people know this, these ads came from Viz magazine, and Viz magazine was not a children's magazine. These ads weren't in National Geographic. Viz magazine was like the UK equivalent of Mad magazine. It was the sort of thing that you'd sneak into your house so your mom didn't see it. The ad campaign was mainly the brainchild of a few European Sega employees, Simon Morris, Phil Lay, and Nick Alexander. They would work with Viz to make as shocking and offensive an ad as they could, all while working under the nose of Sega, who had no idea these ads were running. That was Nick Alexander's job, to make sure Sega never found out this was happening. Then, on one fateful flight back to Japan, a Sega employee found the magazine. What? Things went badly from there. Nintendo, however, decided they wanted a piece of the pie and got their own grotty ads made for print in similar adult magazines in the UK. The ads that were spawned? Someone involved in Yoshi's story probably had to help with this ad, and I find that funny. Readers who saw this ad were a little more than uncomfortable with the implications. The advertising firm who made this returned fire by saying she wasn't in any peril of, just that she was frustrated. Yeah, her boyfriend found a copy of Pocahontas for Game Boy. He's been in there for hours. Nintendo trying to be adult is weird. Like, Mario clearly has no idea what sex is, and neither should the players. But this Game Boy Advanced ad markets it as the second best thing to do in the dark. Why would you ever market yourself like this? Second best? Urban Yeti beats two-person push-ups 100 times out of 100. However, the most infamous print ad of all time has to come from one of the most erratic, unpredictable, and unstoppably odd names in the history of gaming. John Romero. John Romero is a game designer with one of the most insane rockstar-like stories of all time, one that to shunt away in a smaller section of a larger video would be insane. So let's start around 1997. Fresh off getting kicked out of the company that he helped found, id Software, thanks to his whispers of wanting to poach talent for his new company, Romero is free to take all the weird photos of his glowy hand that his heart desired. That got boring after a while though, and John started to turn the wheels on an even more ambitious idea, a brand new first-person shooter called Big Sword. This was going to be the rebirth of first-person shooters, a brand new game on the most bleeding-edge tech, telling a story that traveled through time, all from the twisted mind palace of John Romero. Now, John had always had a bit of an ego in the same way that the Hindenburg had a bit of a bad flight. In the context of being the guy who made Doom, yeah, you can understand that. In the context of being a guy making Big Sword, it gets a bit tougher to swallow. This was Romero's first time working without fellow John Carmack, who had always handled the more technical side of games. Engine switches, delays, and internal shakeups showed off that Romero was doing his best Duke Nukem Forever impression, and things were looking bleak. That's when what many considered the biggest blow to Big Sword came, in the form of this ad. John Romero's about to make you his friend. Nothing about this ad works. It's eye-catching, sure, but so are bear attacks. I wouldn't call that a positive. Big, bold, and dead center was what many people consider to be Romero's ego out of control. No gameplay screenshots, no plot summaries, not even an implication that this was a video game. Sure, the other, much less well-known page of the ad said the game's name, but who was gonna look at that when the other page was there? And it's not like this page helps explain anything anymore, it just says, Daikatana! What the fuck is Daikatana? And who is John Romero? And why does he have such strong opinions on what I should be doing? To people who didn't know who John Romero was, it was just a crass and vulgar ad. To people who did know, it was confirmation that Romero was falling into the worst habits of his rockstar lifestyle. You know who was the most disappointed by the ad though? John Romero! While this seems exactly like something he would do, he was actually uninvolved in the making of the ad itself. It was an independent advertising firm that handled it, and Romero simply gave the very tentative thumbs up. He was worried that the ad was crass and would put the game in a bad light. When it's still talked about today as one of the worst ads not just in gaming, but of all time, you can't help but agree. Romero has since apologized dozens upon dozens of times for the ad, being very sorry about trying to make you his and it's hard to not get the sense that he feels genuinely sorry for putting out an ad like this. Regardless of hindsight, it's still, without question, the most infamous and rightly derided print ad in gaming history. Ah, but paper's in the past. You can't even play video games on paper. We're moving on to the real big fish. Ads that embarrass their entire companies on a much grander scale than a magazine ever could. IO Interactive knows a thing about messing up royally. They were trying to get people killed. If you know them for anything, it's the Hitman series. Lovingly crafted stealth games that let you plot and carry out silent kills across massive sprawling levels with dozens of ways to carry them out. This was a series that had never slowed down, constantly improving and innovating from Hitman 1 to 2 to Contracts to Blood Money. This series was a juggernaut. Agent 47 joined the ranks of the most recognizable characters in gaming and even got to join the hallowed halls of, no, seriously, it had a movie. However, it was in 2006 after the release of Blood Money that IO decided to give 47 a rest and move on to bigger and better things. Medium-sized and average things. Smaller and worse things. We're so sorry, 47. Hitman Absolution was IO's return to form following making some of the worst regarded games of all time, and quite a bit had changed. For instance, their dad had a new dad. Square Enix had bought the company Eidos, who owned IO in 2009, and were eager to get IO back on track with more Hitman games. After making a mess on the carpets with Kane and Lynch 2 Dog Days, work began on Hitman Absolution. Now, the game went on to be considered by fans as the worst entry in the entire series, but we're not focusing on that today. I'd really like to, but we won't. Hitman Absolution had an absolutely massive marketing campaign behind it. Tons of flashy ads with a focus on these latex nuns that got the game into hot water as it was, but it was far from the worst it would get. The time between Blood Money and Absolution had been about 6 years, and in that time, a lot had changed. I was curious why they stopped calling it WrestleMania 22. For the sake of this story, however, the biggest thing to change was social media. Now you had real-time updates on the color of your friends' shirts, and advertisers were keen to latch onto that. You had Burger King making you unfriend people for a free Whopper and then telling your friends that their kindness was worth less than horse meat. You had whatever the heck KFC's up to right now. They made a chicken-based game console. Sky's the limit. But one that's been lost to time is Hitman Absolution's Facebook app. So it's one thing to unfriend your friends for free burgers, it's another thing to try to hire a contract killer on them. Step 1, do your best imitation of a toddler who hates his kindergarten teacher. Hire.hitman.com. Step 2, connect to your Facebook account and find the friend you want to kill the most. Step 3, list the reasons why they should be gunned down like a dog. Step 4, hilarity ensues. Now, despite what logic may imply, the killing somebody portion of this advertisement was the least offensive part. It's actually a cute idea nestled in there somewhere about hiring a fake assassin on your friends, but the real trouble starts back at step 3. Here's where you'd list the reason why your friend should be killed. And if you were a guy, you could have reasons put down like being a redhead, being ugly, and having a tiny dick. Imagine having such a small ding-dong that your friend decides to kill you over it. If you're a lady, however, you get such encouraging statements as you have a muffin top, your boobs are too small, or you look like a man. In an age where cyberbullying was taken more seriously than ever before thanks to its effects being more well understood, it's not hard to see why this ad was pulled. What was hard to see was how it got the okay in the first place. Resident Evil is a series that, at first glance, seems to have its act together when it comes to ads. It's probably not the first series to come to mind, but there are a lot of good Resident Evil ads, like the If These Walls Could Talk They'd Scream ad, the Adults Get Scared 2 ad, and the one that tries to get you to buy the director's cut by saying that it will let you see the game through the director's eyes. Glad it didn't come with his ears either, or I'd reconsider. However, there are 2 ad campaigns that ended up massively backfiring for Capcom, starting around Resident Evil 5. By this point, fans had started to complain that the series was losing its horror edge and was relying too much on action tropes. Resident Evil 5 especially was criticized for barely being scary. What better way to scare a few people than to dismember people in a major city? To promote Resident Evil 5 in the UK, 50 participants would be set loose on the streets for a scavenger hunt. What were they looking for? Well, severed human limbs, obviously. While they were just props, dozens of limbs had been hidden all around London, with those looking for them tasked with bringing them back to Westminster Bridge and screaming Kijuju for points. Kijuju being the place that Resident Evil 5 took place in. So you had a bunch of nerds holding up shockingly realistic severed limbs, screaming made-up words that sounded just foreign enough to get the cops called. How did anybody think this would go well? Well, it gets worse. People had to return the severed limbs to get points that would be tallied at the end. So imagine how horrified the people running the event were when not all the body parts were brought back. Torsos, arms, and a severed head were still kicking around the old foggy apple of London. Is it possible that some fans just went rogue and took the props home? Yes. Is it also just as possible that someone's going to find them and report it as a murder case? Also yes. The marketing firm even had to come out and admit this wasn't part of the event. They legitimately lost the body parts. So this went catastrophically wrong, but surely things would improve for Resident Evil 6, right? This was a game that needed all the help with marketing it could get after the whole logo debacle. They had to have seen it, right? You can't not see it. At first, it was going pretty well, with the cries for help and especially Last Goodbye commercials doing an amazing job of setting a completely hopeless tone that is only somewhat undercut by the fight with the zombie dinosaur in the main game. All right, team, we're almost in the clear. Just gotta avoid any controversy we can. Why are we selling human meat? So this all ties back into the wider No Hope Left alternate reality game, which spanned months and months. But for the Wesker and Sons human butchery, we only need to go back to September, where several fake murder scenes were set up around major London businesses, with autopsy reports subtly hinting towards the Resident Evil universe. However, I doubt many people were saying, "Oh hey, this says the victim was from Raccoon City, that's just like Resident Evil." And more were probably saying, "Holy shit, somebody died!" After more events like bloody messages sent to media outlets and a Twitter account being made, it came to a head on September 28th and 29th as a shop called Wesker and Sons was opened in London's Smithfield Meat Market. This was an entire butcher shop dressed up to look like a cannibal's paradise, human meat packaged up, bodies and limbs hanging from hooks, and just in case we were being too classy about things, a nice severed human penis to officially make this video the one with the highest concentration of penises on the whole channel. Woo! Alright, so I feel I should make extra certain to let you know that everything here is not made of Mike and Melissa. This is all animal meat dressed up to look human. Does that help? No, moving on. Intrepid shoppers who wanted to nibble on some Nicholas flank steak could buy the packaged meat as well as herb seasoning, with the proceeds going to charities benefiting people who had lost limbs. Their heart was in the right place, but they kind of forgot one thing with all these No Hope Left ads. They forgot to mention Resident Evil 6! The only people who were going to get this were people who already knew about Resident Evil and were buying the game regardless. The whole No Hope Left campaign is shockingly sprawling and involved for something that nobody remembers or talks about. You may have heard of the butcher shop and its variety of penises, but I doubt anybody knew about the fake murders taking place to promote, and I can't stress this enough, Resident Evil 6. Those are pretty bad, but they're relatively self-contained. Slap on the wrist, don't do that again. Capcom and IO can't claim to so consistently mess up. These next two have shown time and time again that they can't be trusted when it comes to selling their product. Speaking of untrustworthy, enter EA. A business with more Worst Company in the US awards than maybe any other, EA has shown itself to not be afraid to do things that are dumb. One of those things was attempting to plant evidence on games journalists. Now, generally, you don't need incentive to try to get a games journalist thrown in jail, but it seems that EA's was malicious incompetence. See, in 2009, the game The Godfather 2 was being released. This is a sequel to the game The Godfather, which was based on the first movie. But The Godfather 2 was not based on The Godfather 2, and instead stars a Godfather OC, off to a great start. So to promote the game, special copies were sent out to writers and journalists, containing all sorts of mafia-themed gifts. One of these gifts was a pair of brass knuckles made of actual brass. Problem? Almost every state they were sent to has brass knuckles outlawed as a Class 1 misdemeanor, which can result in upwards of 120 days in jail and a massive fine. So EA was just casually shipping illegal weaponry across the country to promote Godfather 2. And once people started to contact authorities to hand over the weapons they didn't ask for, EA fired back, requesting that they just send the knuckles back to them. Except that's shipping a deadly weapon in the US postal system, which I can't imagine goes very well. But what about the other end of the spectrum? What's a promotion that started off with the best of intentions and ended up doing even more harm? Mercenaries is one of those franchises that lived and died in the 2000s. Nobody's asking for a new Mercenaries game, and with its developers' pandemic dead and buried thanks to EA, it's not like you're gonna get one anyway. However, EA did try their combination best and worst idea to get some more eyes on the game's sequel, Mercenaries 2. In 2008, EA bought over £20,000, the English currency, not the weighing system, worth of gas and took over the last stop petrol station in, guess where, London, and started to give it out for free, setting the cap at £40 per person. If you have a preschooler's understanding of how the world works, this sounds fantastic! Giving people free gas and getting the word out about the game. In practice, it was a disaster. The reason is, if people figure out that they can get free gas, guess what? They aren't going to be focusing on the game you're hawking, they're just going to go for the gas. And would you believe it? A lot of people want free gas. So instead of being a cute little promotion for a game that could desperately use it, EA just managed to create a traffic jam spanning miles as everybody scrambled to get even a drop of free gas. But when it comes to EA's failed marketing attempts, only one can stand at the top. And would you guess that it took the game with Satan in it of all things to get as bad as it did? Dante's Inferno stands at the top of the mountain of, oh god, please let this be the next God of War! Right next to Marlo Briggs in the Mask of Death and Sonic Unleashed. This was an period where EA was convinced that what it took to build a loyal fan base and media empire was to just shout at the consumer that there was a loyal fan base and media empire. This and Dead Space got the go-around on the EA marketing machine and were inescapable for a while. They got animated movies, comics, tons of trailers, and while Dead Space only got a trailer of mothers clutching pearls and saying, "Oh my stars," as a necromorph teared apart Isaac Clarke, Dante's Inferno got it way worse. The way the campaign started, though, was really clever and honestly kinda genius. Several video games journalists, presumably as an apology for trying to get them sent to jail, were sent $200 by EA, but there was a catch. Attached was a note saying that greed was a two-headed beast. Hoarding wealth feeds one beast while squandering it satiates the other. By cashing this check, you succumb to avarice by hoarding filthy lacree. But by not cashing it, you waste it and therefore surrender to prodigality. Make your choice and suffer the consequences for your sin. And scoff not, for consequences are imminent. Thanks for the money? Another gift sent to various journalists was a wooden box that, when opened, would play Rick Astley's Never Gonna Give You Up on repeat. There was no way to get the box to stop unless you smashed it to pieces. Once the box was smashed to smithereens, a note inside said that they had just given into wrath, another sin. Things were going great from here. Fun, inventive uses of the game's themes meant to mess with people that were connected to the space of hardcore gamers. Things started to fall off course, however, at E3 2009. During E3, when the game was being shown off, a group of protesters picketed outside the convention center to protest specifically Dante's Inferno. Being based on the biblical self-insert fanfiction of Dante descending into the layers of hell, it seemed reasonable that some people would get into a tizzy over it, especially with religious bigots getting really into the whole holding a sign and pouting craze around the time. However, something was instantly off about all the protests. All their signs were way too clever. They never once called me a slur. I knew something was up then. Hell is not a game. Cheat codes won't save your souls. EA equals electronic antichrist. Trade in your PlayStation for a PlayStation. By God, this was way too good to be real. Sadly, though, that was exactly the case, since when most of the media died down, the protesters admitted to being paid actors by EA just meant to look like they were angry. This got actual Christians upset, not over the content of the game and the fact that you fight Satan's entire bare cock, but because they didn't actually have a problem with the game and were instead upset at EA painting them as reactionary lightweights. Come on, guys, we didn't even have a problem with this one! This is incredibly hilarious that Christians didn't hate the game, it was the marketing that said Christians would hate the game that they hated. Even then, this is still recoverable. There's still good to be done. Oh, Comic-Con happened. The Sin to Win campaign. EA's attempt to get a gamer to have sex for the first time. How it would work is that across the convention hall were various babes, as Adam referred to Eve in the Bible, all waiting to have their pictures taken with contestants. After that, they would have to upload the picture to Twitter and then go look for more babes. The person with the most nebulous points by the end of the convention would win dinner and a sinful night with 2 hot girls, a limo service, paparazzi, and a chest full of booty. There's a lot to unpack here. First off, paparazzi, what the heck are they taking pictures of? Oh, and behold, we found him, the biggest virgin in the world. He can only score by a contest. Second, what does that mean by sinful night? Like, are we gonna sex it up, or are they just gonna beat the out of me for wrath? Or maybe just like do nothing for sloth? This was a bad idea from step one. You're asking con-goers to be sinful with women. They don't need to be prompted to do that. When people figured out this was happening, EA had to go into damage control and desperately try to figure a way to worm their way out of this one, clarifying that a sinful night was actually a chaperoned play date where you got to meet the devs and have dinner with them before getting the hat or something. Unless the dev team was 2 hot women, I really don't care about the stupid dinner. And at what point in the ad did it ever mention that my sinful night with 2 hot girls would be chaperoned like we're going to the zoo? It's a crying shame the campaign had to go so wrong, cause in the beginning it was actually clever. They had good ideas that were played out in entertaining ways, but by the end they just fumbled it at the layer of hell that we all knew they would fumble it at and were secretly hoping they would. But what if you were a company in the throes of death, with every money-making plan failing through some comedically flawed way? Well, if that was the case, you'd have to have published WWF Warzone on the N60. Acclaim! Acclaim is a studio that made up much of the gaming scene in the late 80s and early 90s, a company that would see a game, any game, and say, that's worth putting an iguana in. This included heaps of licensed shovelware games, and slightly more importantly, most of Midway's super successful games. Aerosmith, Revolution X, Smash TV, and Mortal Kombat all fell into Acclaim's lap and gave them more money than they knew what to do with. Literally, they bought the comics company Valiant and poached some of their IPs to make games out of, including Shadow Man and Turok, each of whom is responsible for the worst ideas you've ever heard. So for the 6th generation who gives a fuck Turok Evolution, Acclaim needed a cheap and quick way to promote the game. Acclaim was currently going through death at the time, so didn't exactly have much to splurge on a large-scale advertising budget, and took the lessons they had learned from selling Mortal Kombat in the 90s into the new millennium. Name your baby Turok! Yep, in America they were willing to shell out 10,000 bones and bonds to get you to christen your newborn baby son Turok. Now, keep in mind that Turok is a made-up word by silly people, but to use a baby as advertising is one of the craziest things ever. The nutbars at Acclaim in charge of marketing claimed that this would make sense because we're giving birth to our biggest game ever, so it's a natural tie-in. There is nothing natural about any part of this. This is all pure nonsense. Now, how is this supposed to sell more copies of Turok Evolution? The same way it was supposed to save children from a lifetime of ridicule and bullying. It didn't. Back in the UK, where apparently every single one of these campaigns took place, it got even sillier, since it wasn't just for people fresh into the world. Anybody could swap out their name for Turok and get a couple £100 and a free Xbox. This, tragically, was an extremely successful campaign, as dozens of people, temporarily or not, changed their names to Turok. If anybody watching this was born with the name Turok, don't tell me, and better yet, don't tell anybody. Cut your parents out of your life, they're pure evil, and just go by Terry. Your quality of life is bound to increase. For other games like Burnout 2 and Gladiator Sword of Who Cares, they had ideas like paying for people's speeding tickets and setting up clear displays in bus stops that would periodically bleed and leak into the streets and cost them even more money in a marketing campaign called Bloodvertising. In unrelated news, I'm very glad that Acclaim is out of business. These and the Turok idea all lack one fundamental thing that I think a lot of these ads suffer from. They forgot to tell you that there's a video game coming out! They don't advertise the game, they just advertise the concept of bleeding, that someone will give you money for no reason, and that true evil still exists in the world. Obviously, this is because when Acclaim does advertise using the game, they do it in the worst way possible. To promote the sequel to a game that nobody cared about, Shadow Man 2 Ekond Coming, Acclaim decided that they'd insulted those who just entered the world. Why not get those who just left? Acclaim promoted the game by asking people to put up Shadow Man ads on tombstones. You know those things meant to mark the lives of those who have passed on to the next life? Yeah, Acclaim wanted to put beloved character Mike Leroy on those. The concept of deadvertising, eat shit, is entirely consistent with the themes of Shadow Man's stupid name, and provides us with a permanent presence for our marketing. Clean out the wax in your ears for this next part, you're gonna want to hear it. This offer might particularly interest poorer families, as this subsidy could go towards burial costs and give their loved ones a good send-off. Where to start? Oh, family, I can feel it. I'm going to that spirit in the sky. Please make sure everyone knows Shadow Man 2 is coming out February 28th, 2002, exclusively to the PlayStation 2, priced at $49.99 USD. So I'm gonna be mourning the loss of a loved one, be on my way back to my car, and see that Shadow Man is coming out soon. What am I supposed to get from that? Who thought that anybody was in the mood to be advertised to in a cemetery? Also, poorer families? Did no one's soul shrivel up and die in the writing of a statement about how you can afford to bury the dead by slapping a Shadow Man sticker over their maiden name? And why do you keep talking about it being consistent with the game's themes? Titanic didn't market itself by crashing a boat in the middle of nowhere. This is all without the obvious, you're advertising on a tombstone. Several people with brains came out against this, with the Church of England saying there's already enough fuss with plastic flowers in churchyards. There's no way we will allow this. When Acclaim themselves perished, it wasn't as a company that put out some quality titles and helped others get into the hands of people that might have never played them. It was as the dumbest group of people on planet Earth who made every mistake possible, even mistakes they had no business making. How'd you drag the church into this? Hopefully any marketing executives watching this now know the do's and don'ts of their jobs thanks to what a pipsqueak on the internet said. Do! Make an ad that plays into the themes of the game in fun and unique ways. Don't! Slap stickers of Shadow Man onto dead people. Do! Make sure to keep your ad in the realms of where it will be viewed so that the right people see it. Don't! Photograph someone having sex with Seaman.